Washington's got to get off to a fast start against Rutgers.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And just a quick reminder for all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We want to talk about some of UW's improvements in the red zone, because this Rutgers game in 2024 was kind of the epitome of red zone struggles. And Washington, to this point, has done a great job turning things around. We want to talk about the defense a little bit and what it's going to take to shut down the Rutgers Stars. It's quarterback Athan Kaliakmani and running back Antwan Raymond. But we're going to get there in a little bit, because obviously Washington had a tremendous comeback win over Maryland. You love to see that 24-20, but you don't want to put yourself in that position once again at home against Rutgers. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Huskies get off to somewhat slow starts. And that's something where in this game against Rutgers, you have several opportunities to really establish your offense early in this contest.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And you're talking about a Rutgers team coming in 0-2 in Big Ten play. So you're not talking about a team that's coming in being world beaters, but also not a team you can take lightly. And we in Washington against lesser competition, let's be fair, not just UC Davis, but a few others, games as well. They've been able to start off pretty decently in terms of, you can kind of hang around a little bit with some of these schools. But yeah, coming back is great. But why not do that early on? We've seen this team be able to, they have the talent to get out to a 14, 17-point lead at halftime. The question is, does Jedd Fisch put the team in the right position? Does the offensive line hold up early enough? And are they able to, enforce their will, shall we say, early on in this game? Because, Jonah Coleman absolutely should run for over 100 yards against Rutgers, which they've given up four of their 5 games. They've given up 100 yards on the ground. Damon Williams probably should factor into that some equation as well. And to me, you look at, even with potential starters being out, there's no reason why UW shouldn't be at least a double-digit lead at halftime.
No, I agree with you there, where obviously the spread is 10.5 thanks to our good friends over at FanDuel. And you're right when you say that, and you can go look at some of the stats that Washington has put out there this season, where over the first 3 quarters, I think I saw it was like 73-59 or whatever in terms of scoring. And then you go look at the fourth quarter, and Washington is outscoring their opponents 73-10 or 72-10. I think the number is in the final quarter of the season through 5 games. And all 10 of those points came against Ohio State. So it's a really interesting study to say this team is finishing really, really well, but you need to really just kick things off on a better note. And early on in the season, we certainly saw that, where, you can throw out the UC Davis game and even Colorado State to an extent there, Wazoo, being the non-conference play. You can take that as you will, but I look at this Rutgers team, and they're number 13 right now in the Big Ten in total defense, allowing 346.6 yards per game. And then you go look at their scoring defense, and it's similarly bad, should we say, like 25.4 points per game. That's 15th in the Big Ten. So there are going to be plenty of opportunities for you to assert your will early on for an offense who last week against Maryland, it just looked lackadaisical. Maybe some of that is the flight across the country. Maybe some of that is just, looking out of sync, different things like that. But for a couple of weeks in a row now, we've seen Washington's offense get off to really, really slow starts. And in a game like this where, you were favored at Maryland too, but where you're multiple score favorites in your own, in your house, and with an opportunity to move to 5-1 on the season, I feel like that's a really important part of this as well. These are things where you look at Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, this offensive line with or without John Mills and Carver Willis, you have a whole lot of things working for you. And, I don't want to get too much into what we were talking about later on here, but you look at this game last year, Washington posted over 500 yards against Rutgers. you just couldn't get into the end zone. And this is one of those things where we look at how Washington has improved from year 1 to year 2 under Jedd Fisch. They have done a much better job of scoring and putting the ball in the end zone. Grady Gross has been really, really solid this year as well. I know this was kind of, the crux of his struggles as well. I think that so many things are rolling in Washington's direction right now, and you're starting to pick up momentum. Things are starting to look really good for you. But this is one of those games where if you can get off to a fast start, I think that coming out of this, even though Rutgers is coming off a bye and you're coming off a short week, this is one of those games where it's okay. Yeah, now we can really see what Washington is building.
Yeah, it's a game where the talent should still win out at the end of the day. The question is, do you cover the 10.5? Jedd, I don't think will care about that at the end of the game if they won, but you want to make it look a little more convincing than last week. Obviously, I think Maryland's defense is better than Rutgers. I'm just kind of judging by, what we've seen at least a little bit. I have more faith in Maryland. I had more faith in Maryland being able to disrupt Washington's game plan a little bit. From the Rutgers side of things, I don't necessarily see that as much. And certainly they're not Ohio State. Let's just get that out of the way pretty easily there. But at the same time, like you mentioned, coming off a bye week, every team is now game planning for Washington for a week and a half at this point. The last 3 opponents, or at least 2 opponents, have been coming off of byes.
3, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was 3, but I know for a fact it was 2. Yeah, I kind of wonder if there's a call to the Big Ten offices at some point with Jedd on that. But with that aside.
That already happened.
Right, but again, it's just another, almost like every week, just again, really. But with that being said, you think about when you game plan for Washington, you know what you're going to get. But you also necessarily don't, because there's so many different weapons that you can work with, whether it's Decker DeGraff, whether it's Grady in the special teams, whether it's Denzel going up, or whether it's Adam Muhammad potentially emerging as, the number 2 back and maybe finding a little more success. There's so many pieces for Jedd to work with on offense that, or even Amari Evans, kind of throw him into the mix as well, where there's a number of guys that we've seen emerge a little bit, but not fully pop off. And when you talk about ways to combat Rutgers defense and ways to get in those, 14-0, 10-0 early on leads, there's enough pieces there to make it work. My question is, does Jedd on a short week have enough time to come up with a decent enough game plan? Because I don't think the injuries are going to be an issue. You mentioned John Mills and Carver Willis. Paki Pino was the left guard for that entire comeback. So
Paki was stellar.
And so when you think about that, that shouldn't be as much of a concern. And you would hope that Maximus McCree in his first start of the season, if he has to go again, he has a little more experience now coming in this season and being able to work with this offensive line, and specifically Paki as well, having played that second half in that fourth quarter specifically. So there's no real excuse for Washington to not come out early on. And yeah, if you put them away at the end, great. But there's no reason to not flip that script and not have to play catch up at the same time.
So it's because this is something where we want to talk about this, not just because of what it should be this week against Rutgers, as you continue to try to establish yourself as one of the top 6 teams in this conference. It's more so, this is something where you look at the next couple of weeks when you have Michigan and then Illinois. Those are also games where you want to try to establish yourself early on, especially going to Michigan, right? Like, you want to make sure that you can put points on the board early and just start to get your offense in a rhythm instead of having to worry about, not even just making a comeback later on, just keeping yourself in the game or trying to say, hey, we need to score. We haven't been able to move the ball at all in this game so far. Like, those are things that really do matter, not just over the course of one game, but over the course of an entire season, because that will start to wear on you. And that will start to just give other coaches opportunity to say, hey, in the first half, they've been, just looking like very basic stuff. So we can attack them in this way. We can attack them in that way. And knowing Jedd, maybe he has some extra tricks up his sleeve to say, okay, yeah, we've been setting this up for 3 or 4 weeks, and now we're going to run this off of that. Whatever it is you want to say, I feel like those are all possibilities, but you shouldn't even be having that discussion, because this offense has shown so far this year that it's talented enough to make a statement early on in games. And especially now as we are getting into the heart of the schedule and the heart of Big Ten play, doing that in a game like this against a Rutgers defense that, yeah, it's been subpar this year in terms of numbers, but Greg Schiano is always going to throw a very well-coached team out there. So I'm just really curious to see how Jedd is going to want to attack that, because there are a lot of things that could happen in this game, but you can just kind of eliminate a lot of those extra factors of a short week, of whatever else. Rutgers is taking a cross-country flight, so that's something that may factor into this equation as well. By just starting fast and just making sure that you can assert your will early on in this game. But Lars, let's switch sides of the ball here because Rutgers is bringing a pair of stars in on offense who Ryan Walters needs to contain. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts for a project fast? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats like me, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Lars, as we switch sides of the ball here, Athan Kaliakmani is someone who, when I look back at the 2024 game, I wasn't necessarily overly enthralled with what he brought to the table from his skill set, but he has made a major jump forward. Like he was someone I would certainly consider a game manager last year, but this year he has made a significant step in his development, and he's done a really good job where he's second in the Big Ten right now in passing yards at 279.8 yards per game with a 9-2 touchdown to interception ratio. And this Rutgers offense is also sixth in the Big Ten, right behind Washington, averaging 39 points per game. So this unit has been really solid so far this season. And when we look at some of the just changes that Ryan Walters made, I don't even know if we want to call them adjustments because they just did similar things, but just played them a little bit differently, like our buddy Jake Butt said on the show earlier this week. I look at this game and I think that we're going to see a very similar style of defense to what we saw in the second half against Maryland, where it is more aggressive, more playing up and not, sitting back and putting a roof on the defense and being afraid to beat deep. Because Rutgers, they're third in the Big Ten with 90 plays of 10 plus yards, but then you change that metric to 20 plus yards and they drop all the way down to 11th with like 21, I think the number is. So it's really interesting where they're somewhat explosive, not overly explosive though. And I think this is something where Washington can find a way to take advantage of that by, especially if Tacario Davis is back. You can play that press man that you're used to, get after the quarterback with five guys and make him make decisions quick, which is one thing that Ryan Walters highlighted that he does know how to do. But I look at this game and I think that the number one thing you need to do is find a way to slow him down and make this offense one-dimensional, whether it's him or Antwan Raymond. If you can take one of those guys out of the picture and force Rutgers into a one-dimensional attack, which also, comes from starting fast. If you're able to build a two-possession lead early on this game, obviously that's something you're going to be able to do. I think that's going to be crucial in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when you look at Washington's run defense, if you take out Antwan Raymond, that's a good start. But what really concerns me is Rutgers has three receivers that they could go to at any point in time that have at least two touchdowns or more. One of them, ironically, is DT Sheffield, who was considering Washington out of the portal at one point in time. I think he's third on the team in receptions and second on the team in touchdown receptions. So when you talk about, Kaliakmani, one thing to consider that is different from the Maryland game, his completion percentage is darn near close to 70. And that, to me, is kind of where I look at Ryan Walters and say, how are you going to disrupt the timing? Because it's an RPO kind of offense where, you're making one or two quick reads and you're getting the ball out, which is why I'm glad you highlighted that stat of the 10, 15 plus. Then when you get into 20, it's not really there. It's just about matter of get the ball out into space, get it into your playmakers' hands in a way, not like Jedd Fisch's offense, but a little more similar and having similar success. So for me, Tacario Davis, if he's able to come back, that's a massive piece. If he's not, again, we are massive fans of Dylan Robinson. This is the Dylan Robinson show, a record almost at this point. But aside from Dylan, and rightly so, Ephesians Price on the other side, and that's good. But that third receiver could end up being the X factor where if you're able to shut down Rutgers' run game, that's one thing. But then being able to contain their pass game as well, like you either have to speed up the clock of Kelly McManus or find a way to blanket their three receivers and force them into a run game, which at that point, you're taking Washington more times than not.
So I like where you're going with that. One thing that I think needs to be highlighted when you talk about the quick rhythm passing game with Athan Kaliakmani versus Malik Washington is Kaliakmani is 7th in the Big Ten right now, averaging 8.8 yards per attempt versus Malik Washington, who's 14th at a very nice 6.9. So I look at this and I think that when you talk about disruption, you talk about having three receivers who you can rely on and go to at any time. This is what we've been talking about with Washington's secondary, where you have opportunities to step up and show this is a much improved group, despite what, some numbers might say where you're playing backed off coverage. The numbers got a little bit inflated against Washington State, if you really want to, get technical with some of these things. But I look at whether it is Dylan Robinson or Chikario Davis. Ephesians Prysock has improved in leaps and bounds this year. I've been really happy with what we've seen from him in 2025. He's obviously gotten bigger, stronger, more physical at the point of attack, and is doing a much better job in man coverage. And also you look in the nickel, Leroy Bryant had a really, really solid game against Maryland. That's something that Ryan Walters highlighted in his Tuesday press conference, saying, yeah, we were really happy with how he bounced back, and we're excited to watch him continue to grow. And whether it is him in the nickel or it is Rashawn Clark, you have two really capable guys right there who, when everything is going right on the back end of the defense, your pass rush should be able to hit home within 3.5 seconds at the very worst. And especially when you look at the fact that you're getting Javon Parker back, I'm really curious to see what kind of impact he's going to give you a little bit more than a year removed from the Achilles, obviously playing against the team where he unfortunately got hurt last season. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like because you have the bodies to be able to make an impact, especially on the interior against an experienced Rutgers offensive line. But you talk about the run game. This is one of those things where, let's say you aren't able to start fast and Rutgers is trying, some of these slow, methodical drives that you're able to pull off with a running back like Antwan Raymond, who's had a tremendous season so far. I think that Washington's run defense has been quietly one of the most improved units in the Big Ten, where right now you're fourth, obviously at 78 yards per game. I think that this is a unit that hasn't been talked about enough because even though you had a really solid game against Ohio State, you lost that one. So people aren't going to, take a lot of positives away from that game, even though there are several. I look at this matchup with Antwan Raymond, and if you're able to really contain him, unlike the matchup last year where Kyle Monangai and Samuel Brown just killed you on the ground all day long, this is one of those days for, Ryan Walters can get up and talk to us next Tuesday and say, yeah, look at how much we've improved in this area because of the bodies we've added on the interior, because we're able to, utilize the scheme a little bit differently and commit Alex McLaughlin or McEllisteen or whoever down in the box for run support as well, because we don't need that extra help on the back end. So I'm really curious to see that's going to look like too.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Alex McLaughlin. No shocker that you did, but I think he might be the
Crazy, right?
Right, shocker there. Breaking news. Dun, 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 dun. But no, you think about his impact, especially against Wazoo, and what we've seen from him throughout his time in practice leading up into the season. That is a guy where whether you're talking about shutting down the run or that third receiver, Alex McLaughlin might be the guy at the end of the day to solve both problems. And I think for me, that's where scheming him, I don't want to say scheming the defense for him per se, but just kind of aligning things where you talk about bringing Jake Amani back, getting him more into the fold. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I just wonder if this is a game that could almost fully unleash Alex McLaughlin, where no matter what role he ends up playing, he's the guy that makes the biggest impact at the end of the day.
So I like where you're going with that. I think the wording is just a little bit off there because you make a great point. Scheming the defense for Alex McLaughlin, it already is. He is just the perfect fit for it. When you go back and you look at what Ryan Walters has done, we talked about this leading up to the season where a defensive back, I think it was 4 of 8 in 2023, were like the leading tackler. Defensive backs were the leading tacklers of 4 of the top 8 in 2023, and then 6 of 8 last season, with Dylan Tiedemann at Purdue being the leading tackler for Ryan Walters in both seasons. So that's a really big part of this. And then you look at what you're able to do with him off of that as well. You're playing him close to the line of scrimmage. You ask him to play man coverage, where Octavian Smith did a really, really good job against him in this game, or excuse me, Dorian Fleming. in this game against Maryland, where it wasn't his best day in man coverage, but you still saw him find other ways to impact the game. And as he continues to grow and mature and learn what it's like to play in the Big Ten, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do, because in a game like this, we referenced it a couple times. Against Ohio State, he had 13 tackles. He was their leading tackler. He was in there in run support quite frequently. And he's just a guy who was just such a perfect scheme fit for what Ryan Walters wanted to do. So I think you make a great point that, if this is another one of those games where he has 8, 9, 10 tackles and is able to just really make a big impact on this game in more ways than one, I'm not going to be shocked, because that's just what he's shown to do so far this season. And it might go a little bit unnoticed because, when you are basically playing linebacker as a safety and cleaning up plays, it's going to look a little bit different, where people are going to say, why is a defensive back in there making these tackles? But that's just the way it has been with him all season long. And I think that's going to continue, which is great, because he's just shown to be such a reliable piece in the middle of the field, no matter what his role is. But Lars, let's jump back over the offensive side, because Washington's red zone improvements are really, really important. And this is a game where we need to see those things come to fruition. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Quo. One of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. One of the most important things is Quo, again, formerly known as OpenPhone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging. And their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep businesses moving forward even when you're off the clock. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockdowncollege. That's QUO.com/lockdowncollege. And if you got existing numbers with a number service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Lars, when we look at one of the biggest improvements that Washington has made so far this season, it's been in the red zone, and it's not relatively close. And I look back at this Rutgers game in 2024, and I flash all the PTSD memes on the screen of what that game looked like as we got down into the red zone. And it was really frustrating to watch, because that was the game where it was, okay, there are some real major holes here. And you saw them against Wazoo, and then obviously things got a little bit better against Northwestern. You make that trip out to Rutgers, and it was, oh, yeah, this isn't great. You were able to move the ball very, very well between the 20s, and then you get down to the red zone. So many things went wrong. And I'm excited to see what Jedd Fisch might have in store for this particular game, because this is one of those matchups where I feel like he's going to try to right some of those wrongs.
Yeah, almost like scoring most points in the Apple Cup, maybe. Like Jedd knows the numbers here. Just a hunch on that one. But no, it's a good point you make, because when I was diving into that story inside the Huskies wire, I should say, where you looked at not only is Washington scoring, but they're scoring touchdowns, not field goals. That's the main thing here. You're not settling for 3, you're taking 6. And also you're getting it from a number of different guys, where it's not just 1 or 2 guys that you're leaning on, where I think it was 22 or 23 where Cam Davis was basically the guy inside the 5-yard line for whatever reason, and it worked. But when you look at all the different weapons that Washington has, it's been, a complementary of guys, where you look at Rutgers, they're equally not struggling, I should say, but it's basically a boom or bust type of situation for them. And with Washington, you seem to have that confidence that anytime you get inside, I think they're 21 to 22 possessions, 21 red zone conversions. I think
That's right.
four of those are field goals, 4 or 5 of those are field goals.
Four.
And so you look at that and think 19 of those are touchdowns. Now, yeah, some of those are coming into UC Davis, but I think it was the only one they didn't convert was Ohio State, and that says something. Now, you look at the Maryland game, you got all three of those. You look at, the Wazoo game, you got all those. And so for me, it's a matter of you have confidence the team is going to drive into the red zone. It's just a matter of who's going to be the beneficiary of scoring that 6, because you look at last season, Will Rogers drives the team down to the 2-yard line in the second half. I believe like first drive of third quarter, stalls at the 2-yard line. I think he missed, Denzel on that play. First of all, Damon Wayne is the quarterback. As much as we love Will Rogers, I have faith that Damon's going to score in 4 tries inside the 5-yard line. That's just a hunch. I don't know. But whether it's Damon with his legs or Damon finding somebody open, Jonah getting a touchdown on the ground, Adam Muhammad getting a touchdown on the ground, you can pick a number of different avenues to go. There's just a plethora of options to find 6. And that almost hasn't been the case for Washington.
Yeah, and that's been the thing where the touchdown percentage, I just had it pulled up, of 77.27% is also the 3rd highest in the Big Ten. One of the crazy numbers here that as I was scrolling through CFB stats is there are 2 teams with 100% conversion rate in the red zone right now. One of them is Oregon. The other is UCLA. I just need to throw that out there because that absolutely blew my mind, and I never would have guessed that in 100 years. But, back to Washington here. But I look at this game, and you do make a good point here, where there were several times that in this game against Rutgers last year, Jedd did turn to Jonah inside the 5, and the holes just weren't there. And the defensive line just collapsed everything. I don't think that would necessarily be the case this year. You mentioned earlier, John Mills or Paki Finau, whoever's starting there, Carver Willis, Maximus McCree. I do feel a lot better about this particular offensive line group. And you mentioned Will Rogers missing a throw or two. Yeah, there was the 4th down ball. I remember that got tipped when they ran like play action down to the 2-yard line or something like that. There were plays like that too, where it's, that might not have been the best play call. I think that as much as you can question some of Jedd's particular situational play calling mishaps, if you will, this is one of those games where not only, like we said, trying to right some of these wrongs, you can just look at the personnel differences now. And we look at how this offense was able to operate in this game a year ago. And I don't think Rutgers is necessarily more talented on the defensive side than they were last season. And I look at it and I just think to myself, the play calling is going to look very, very different if you can get down inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line, where there is going to be a lot more just downhill running with Jonah Coleman. Maybe you are going to call a read option or 2 to try to get Demond more involved with his legs in that area of the field. And then, of course, like you look on the outside, Rutgers has some talent in the secondary, but I look at Denzel Boston against these corners that are, 5'10", 5'11", and we know Jedd doesn't mind throwing him a fade ball. So I think that's another thing that kind of comes into play here. And when you trust the offensive line to hold up in these tight windows as well, this is another thing that I think Jedd has a whole lot of options that he can go to. And you can make excuses and say, well, this wasn't the case last year, because of this, because of that. I just think that he's way more comfortable with where this group is right now and is a little bit more willing to open up the playbook a little bit more as he gets down inside the 5-yard line.
And it's worth noting with Jonah, yeah, you could hand the ball off to him last year, but in this Antwan Raymond, Jonah Coleman battle of the top 2 running backs in the Big Ten, Jonah has 19 receptions for over 200 yards. That cannot go understated here when you talk about scoring inside the red zone, where let's say Rutgers finds a way to slow Jonah down and maybe you don't get as much push. You have to play action game. You got Jonah, kind of as a check down or as a swing option where maybe you throw it to him for a 10, 12-yard gain that ends up a 6. Like there's many different avenues where last season it was either just turn and hand it to Jonah or, I hate the word pro style offense because it's kind of been watered down over the years where and what is a pro style offense at the end of the day? But what it means is you're using your athletes in the best position possible. So if Jonah's not able to get it on first down, throw it to him on second down. Don't do that. We're going to hand it to him 3 times in a row, and then we get it a 4th and call it 7 from the 7-yard line. And now you're kind of not at a disadvantage, but now that playbook, the options for plays has significantly decreased, where obviously we're not going to see a speed option at any point in this game. But with that being,
you saw 2 last week.
I know, and that's why I kind of said maybe go away from it this week. Don't try and double down and go for 4. But you have so many different options, and again, I don't necessarily think Denzel's obviously your 1A, 1B in the red zone, but there's so many other guys, whether it's Jonah as a runner or Jonah as a pass catcher. I still want to believe Jordan Washington has a role in this offense this season. So maybe you sprinkle a little bit of Jordan Washington in there. Omari Evans is a guy. Decker DeGraff is a guy that we mentioned. There's enough there to not just pigeonhole yourself into one or two play calls. I think that's the important thing for Jedd. And we've seen that from him this season where he's expanded the playbook a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we knew that was going to happen with Damon. But I do think there was a natural progression where even if Damon was the full starter last year, I'm not sure he had the full playbook either way. Now this season, it really does seem like Jedd has full confidence in any play call. I know for a fact he said he did last season. I actually believe it this time because we've seen it.
No, I see where you're going with that. And that's one of those things where one game I like to think back on where you talk about just fully expanding the playbook is the read option touchdown that Damon scored against Indiana. Those are some of those things that I just expect as the season goes along, we're going to see more of that. Just not just necessarily that particular play call, but you talk about just getting your best athletes into space and letting them work and getting the ball in their hands. That's something that the Big Ten is still adjusting to with some of these West Coast schools, because you look at the Wisconsins, the Michigan States, some of these other offenses that are just traditional Big Ten style, where it's we are bigger and stronger than you and we are just going to ram the ball right down your throat. That's not necessarily how Jedd and this Washington offense operate. They've shown that they're able to do that if they want to with Jonah Coleman, with this offensive line when it's at full strength. But in a game like this, I feel like you do have the ability to just pick and choose your moments with what you want to do. And that's one of the things that I really like about this Jedd Fisch offense is he gives you a plethora of options to find ways to not just, get into the end zone, but to pick up chunk plays and move the sticks and do different things like that. Where you're right. Yeah, there are times where it can be a little bit predictable, but there are other times where it's, okay, this is a nice wrinkle here. That's a nice wrinkle there. And I think as Jedd continues to grow and evolve as a play caller, those are things that are going to continue to change as well. But Lars, that's all we got for today. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you know us when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.